Well, we can no longer be in denial. He's just not that into us. In fact, he left us and he took his Rams with him. Or did we run Stan Kroenke off with the way we run our region? Tonight we tackle two issues. What went wrong with the Rams and what's wrong or right with our fragmented form of government? Stay tuned.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned.
It is a difficult process, and as Roger said, it is bittersweet. We understand the emotions involved of our fans, and it's not easy to do these things. They are purposefully made hard.
After years of speculation and months of wooing and worry, in just a few seconds, football left St. Louis. The St. Louis Rams are moving to Los Angeles, and Tuesday night, St. Louis social media erupted when the announcement was made. Multiple hashtags about the move have consistently trended on Twitter, posts ranging from funny to obscene as Rams fans express a sense of betrayal and anger towards Rams owner Stan Kroenke. Matt Seebeck said, "The Raiders just got extra credit for not turning in their homework. The Rams did a PowerPoint thesis with star-wipe transitions and flunked," referring to the proposed stadium in St. Louis and no real plan for a stadium in Oakland. When news hit the Blues game at Scott Trade, fans chanted Kroenke's name, not in a flattering way. St. Louis football fans are certainly feeling empty, but just what does losing an NFL franchise for the second time mean for the St. Louis region?
Alvin Reed, STLMag.com, is here with us. We're going to talk more at length about the Rams and what this means going forward next week. But we almost can't not talk about it, or at least it's what everyone is talking about it, because they feel how?
Well, I think there are some that feel betrayed by the Rams and the National Football League. I don't feel like that because I think it was pretty obvious to me 5 years ago, a little bit more than that. I started writing about it and talking about it on the radio, in that we need to do something now because of the way the lease is set up, that there is a chance that this man who's worth billions of dollars can move this team elsewhere. And those of us who were saying that at the time were laughed at and scoffed at. No way, no way, no way. All right, so action should have been going on at that time. Well, okay, it didn't happen. The silence should have been taken, as I wrote this week, as not silence, but like a rattlesnake. When you get close to it, you hear that the tail. Like it's there. He's telling us what his plans are. We should have forced him, called his hand, said, are you going to be here or are you going to not? And this was like 3 years ago or so. We never did it. It was too late. And you were saying, did we chase him out of the region? No, I don't think we chased him out of the region. I think he was running, but we left ourselves so far behind him that we couldn't catch him.
Let's go to a Twitter poll that we did earlier this week where, you said you're not surprised. 87% of respondents said they knew the Rams would leave. Does the lack of surprise you? Did we all know this was coming? And if so, why did we try so hard to keep him?
Well, we shouldn't have tried so hard to keep him, I think, because if everyone was corrected, like, I know he's going to leave, I know he's going to leave, that's some afterthought. If 87% of the people in this region and if 7% of the people who run this region truly believe there was no chance to keep the Rams, all this would not have gone forward. But what's frightening to me is I think people did know that it was such a long shot or maybe an impossibility. Why are we spending $17 million? And I think that needs to be explained. And I think every dollar and every place it went needs to be put out there for this region to know exactly what was it all about.
You're talking about the governor's task force with
yes.
Dave Peacock
yes.
and
yes.
Bob Blitz. Were they lied to? Do you think the governor, the mayor, did the NFL lead us on?
No, that whole they led us on and they lied to us, no. This was always going to be about a man trying to build a $2 billion stadium with his own money in Los Angeles, which will be able to host Super Bowls and do all kind of other events, Final Fours and things like that, against a stadium that was going to sit 62,000, would already put you in a place where you were 22nd. If you sold out every seat every year, but if all the other teams too, you'd be 22nd in attendance, okay? It was not up to that level. And I think that needed to be recognized from the day that the stadium was announced, and everybody was so excited, and sports radio people just all pandered to it and all that. And people really needed to ask difficult questions, and unfortunately, too few people were asking those difficult questions.
So what are the consequences? What are the consequences? We know the consequences if you're right that we didn't ask the right questions. What are the consequences now that he's left?
Well, I think, one, you can go back and try to say, like, what lessons are learned, all right? And like I said, where'd the money go? What do we learn from this? You could take care of that here in the next few months or whatever. But going forward, we have to stop being so reactive. We have to be proactive. We have to see what's going to happen, and we have to determine our own future. You know, it's not like I say, you said like you determine your own destiny. Well, destiny is what's going to happen to you, so you don't determine that at all. But what's going to be, all right, let's just say, for instance, let's just say today, we're going to build an aquarium, and we're going to build it on this spot. Let's put the time, the energy, the emotion into making that happen that we did to trying to keep a football team that seems like it was going to leave anyway.
Did we miss an opportunity to break up with someone we knew was cheating on us in the first place?
And move on and get another date.
Okay, let's take a trip back in time with me, if you
right.
would, or Flashback Friday, as the kids would say. This is Donnybrook, and you may recognize the circumstances under which this discussion is had.
Life without pro football in St. Louis. Is it livable? I'll ask you, Rich Coster, do you miss the Big Red?
I haven't even noticed that they're gone, honestly. I have not noticed.
And you made your living covering the Big Red for many years. Bill McClellan, what's your reaction?
I think this season is more fun. I mean, it's more fun and more profitable to root against the Big Red than it was to root for and bet on the Big Red.
And it's less frustrating not to have to put up with all these miserable defeats and so on. Ray Hartman, we know you're the greatest sportsman in town. Your reaction?
I resemble that remark. I've been a Big Red fan for really all my life, and watched the first game kind of not being sure who I was going to root for, and I was like jumping up and down laughing at the end of the game. I thought it was great, but I think it is a rather a rationalization to say we don't miss having pro football. I think we do economically and spiritually miss it.
I find myself rooting against the team that I root. I've seen all 3 games so far from Phoenix, and I find myself rooting against these same Cardinals I rooted for, and I really feel bad, but I for some reason, I guess I'm getting even now because they left St. Louis.
Well, we can tell Ray has always been fashion forward.
There you go.
But other than that, so here we are. History has repeated itself. Are we any positioned any differently as a city to handle this? How will we move forward compared to the first time, perhaps?
Well, I think we have some issues that we didn't have then. Obviously, crime was a problem then, and it is now. But I think we've come to a point where there are some real things that we have to address. How do we come together as a region? And I know we're about to talk about that a little bit more now, and just what are the best things to go forward? That needs to be discussed. I will say this, that I didn't live here in 1987. I was a business editor at Atlanta State Journal at that time in Michigan when the team left. I was moving back to St. Louis right when the Rams came. In fact, the day I moved back to St. Louis to stay was the day they announced the deal that the Rams were going to come here. But when I was crushed, really, was when that team went to Jacksonville. Because I lived on the East Coast then, and when they said Jacksonville, not St. Louis, that really hurt me. That was the only thing that I just don't get it. Okay, well now we've just lost another team. It's almost like maybe I'm just numb to it, but quite frankly, it's not nearly as bad feeling for me as it was when we didn't get the expansion team.
And it doesn't seem like there's any real momentum or at least there's no energy to even consider it now to rally the troops and go after this again.
Well, as I said yesterday on Donnybrook, I will say this, that if the phone rang tomorrow with all the tough talk coming out of the mayor's office, and it was Roger Goodell and said, like, hey, in 3-4 years, we're talking Toronto and another team, and we're going to add them, we would dive back in with a different plan, better thought out, no public money, hopefully. But I would say do it. I'd say go for it. Hey, what we got to lose?
Hey, listen, if we continue to extrapolate this relationship analogy, it might start to sound abusive. I'm not sure.
Oh, well, you know, hey,
okay.
It's a rich girl, man.
Alvin, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere because we want to talk to you about what you just kind of alluded to the fact that we're talking about bigger issues or maybe wider spread issues about our government and our fragmentation. But not before. I'll ask you about that on the other side of a recap of this week's social media conversation that will inform the rest of the show.
This week, the Stay Tuned Twitter chat participants weighed in on regionalism and our 92 municipalities and helped frame tonight's show. Court Hinton feels regionalism is a negative. He said it's hurt the STL region, making it so fragmented, city versus county, metro area versus STL county. One of our featured contributors for the chat, St. Louis Strong, said some say it creates better access, but the smallest munis have been rife with corruption. Casey Hinton countered, stating corruption knows no size, happens in bigger or smaller munis. Aaron B. thinks having so many palms to grease makes implementation of any plan more expensive and difficult. Better Together says it's not just inefficient, but unfair when municipalities are dependent on their courts, adding, when you have a town that takes over 40% of its revenue, some at 60% from court fines and fees, that's a problem. Many of the chat's participants are concerned that this many munis means too many cooks in the kitchen. Some believe that all these municipalities came about from decades of so-called white flight. Want to be a part of our next chat? Follow us on Twitter at StayTunedSTL and join the conversation on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. with the hashtag StayTunedSTL.
Okay, Alvin is still with us from STLmag.com. Also with us, Tony Messenger. Welcome back, the Metro columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And Jim Brassfield, Vice President of City Strong, which developed as kind of a reaction to Dave Leipoltz's organization. He's the Director of Community-Based Studies for Better Together. And in the interest of a tidy segue, maybe I'll start with you, Tony, because last week on the show you mentioned that this idea of what we're talking about now, the fragmentation of our region, some would say it serves people better, others would disagree. You said there was a connection, perhaps. Do you see a connection between this conversation and the one Alvin and I were just having with the Rams?
I see a connection between the conversation about fragmentation in St. Louis and almost everything that's going on in our region. So last week we were talking about the flooding and how difficult it is to plan when there's 90 municipalities doing their own thing. The stadium. One of the problems with the stadium plan that made it so weak, that made it easier for the NFL to turn it down, is that when the county executive said, we want to go to a public vote, and the mayor and the governor said, well, we don't need to do that, they just dropped the county out of it. So forget all that tax money, forget all the people in those municipalities. It's emblematic of what happens in our community on a variety of issues, but particularly big issues related to economic development. We are so fragmented by school district, by police department, by municipal courts, what we saw in Ferguson and what we're seeing in the legislature and in the Supreme Court, and trying to respond to that in terms of the problems in the municipal courts. That fragmentation is causing a lot of the problems that we have as a community.
Dave, let's try to quantify some of this fragmentation, because I know you guys have done some studies before we kind of dive in on the pros and cons. Is there a measurable way to back up the idea that we are fragmented?
Sure. I mean, I think when you look at the mere numbers, 81 courts, 58 police departments, 43 fire departments. We have 684 elected officials, municipal officials, 571 aldermen. If you look at that from the inside, it's difficult to fathom. If you're somebody coming in trying to look at it for business expansion to relocate, you don't even know where to start. In the fallout from Ferguson, we had CBS News, the Department of Justice, reaching out to just try and figure out how the region functions. The city's a county. The St. Louis County doesn't have anything to do with the city. Those sorts of things.
So this is different than other regions?
Absolutely.
And is that quantifiable in terms of how we compare to other regions?
Sure. We found that it's costly. You know, one of the arguments is that local governments it's closer to the people. And that's true. But it also comes at a price. You're operating 90 city halls. You're operating all those different police departments. Every city has a city manager. I think that there's 25 that make six-figure salaries. That's very different. So if people want that, that's fine, but those are facts that you're going to have to pay for. There's no way to streamline 90 city halls.
Jim, tell me how you came to this conversation, and I gather that you have a very different perspective.
A somewhat different perspective. I think we can probably blame it all on James Madison, because
I thought we were blaming everything on Stan Kroenke.
Well, because American government at all levels, tends to be fragmented. We have 50 states. We have small states like Wyoming and Delaware, large states like California. And would the country function more efficiently if we had no states, just one big country? Well, maybe some people would think that, but I think the same thing you come down to urban areas, and in all urban areas you have a variety of different kinds of governmental structures. I mean, I've lived in Cleveland, and I thought Cleveland was a lot like St. Louis. Not quite as many municipalities, but lots of municipalities in the area, multiple counties in an urban area. So I don't think what makes our St. Louis County a little different is that we have the 90 municipalities in the county, and some of them are very small. But take that away, and I don't find St. Louis being that much different than most other urban areas. And in fact, an old friend of mine, an eminent political scientist, wrote a classic piece a number of years ago talking about governance in urban areas, and he was talking about Cleveland, not St. Louis, as being an exercise in diplomacy. That if you want to, look at it like you would look at trying to do diplomacy with a number of nations, and if you want to be successful in pulling people together, you have to exercise the skills of negotiation and diplomacy rather than a kind of a single executive issuing orders.
Let me show another Twitter poll we did, and while this isn't scientific, it may bring up an interesting perspective, and that is we asked the Twitter audience if St. Louis has too many municipalities. 92% said yes, we do. So whether or not functionally or the different philosophies of government, is there a mentality or a mindset that that goes back to what you're talking about, that we don't come together and solve things in a singular way or in a unified way?
Well, I think our definition of municipality is different in St. Louis too. Municipality in some places like Louisville, for example, means that you have a metro government, but then you can levy a property tax to have extra levels of service. In St. Louis, it means you have your own courtroom, it means you have your own police department, fire service. And also within a region of 1.3 million people, when you have 90 governments, there's a hyper-localized version of what success is. So I'll offer an economic development incentive to a business just to move a mile down the road because my citizens get that revenue then. And it's very divided, and there's internal competition instead of external. Or
even larger than on the small, Centene wanting to build a tower in Ballpark Village, and then now we'll stay in Clayton instead.
I answered the poll, and I'm part of that 92%. And I think that while it's not a scientific poll, I think you'd actually find many members of Jim's organization that would agree that there are too many municipalities in St. Louis County. There tends to be this acceptance that, well, there's a few bad apples, there's some that are too small that don't have the revenue. Maybe we should get rid of those, but let's not throw the whole thing out. I go back to the study that the Police Executive Research Forum did when they were looking at our providing how we provide police service in this region, and they're a really well-respected national organization of law enforcement folks, and they said they haven't seen fragmentation like this, specifically in police departments, anywhere else in the country, and it's negatively affecting our ability to provide public safety to our community. That, to me, is a rallying cry for, yeah, we've done this for a long time, but it's time to do something different.
What's at stake? I mean, more than just football. Who stands to benefit or suffer?
Well, you would have the elimination, quite frankly, at first, of North County municipalities. And it would dilute some of the African-American representation that you have in St. Louis County. That'd be the first to go. Now, two, you may have had 92% of people say, like, yeah, there are too many municipalities, okay? I guarantee you, and I live in Kirkwood, and I give all the standard answers. I like having my own police department. I like having my own fire department. When a tree limb falls, and this actually happened, and takes out a power line during an ice storm, I'm not waiting 2 days. I'm probably waiting 2 hours because we call up our power from Ameren. We have our own electric department in Kirkwood. I like that. That's what I pay my taxes for, and I have no problem with that. And so I cannot see, I don't want to be part of a borough. I don't want to be part of this major conglomeration of things because I like what I have. Now, you could call me selfish, and that's fine.
Is that easier to say when you live in Kirkwood than it is unincorporated North St. Louis
I
County?
can't speak for unincorporated North St. Louis. That's what I'm saying is that, but I can speak for where I live. And I think that there's a broad brush that says that you're either selfish or you're racist or you don't care about the rest of the region if you want to go separate from this, conglomeration of things. And I disagree with that. I just totally disagree with that. And I don't think it's fair to kind of say that you are what's standing in the way of what could be, work in St. Louis and St. Louis County. St. Louis and St. Louis County is not where we have too many municipalities, maybe true, maybe not. But what we lack is leadership. What we lack is somebody who can get the job done. And we keep electing people and doing things that are more interested in themselves than they are in this region, and that's what our problem is.
But whomever you elect, to what office would you like to see provide that leadership in this particular system that we have?
Well, we have a mayor, and we have a county executive, and the Board of Aldermen is coming down in its number in a number of years here. That's already been, voted on. You've got the county, more than 1 million people, and what, 6 people are on the council?
Can one elected office rally their entire region in the way it's set up now?
No. But I also think that there is a mentality in St. Louis that for Veneta Terrace to have better services, to have a baseline of services that we say you're going to have no matter what because you're a citizen of this region, that a Kirkwood or a Webster has to decline. What we need to find is how to raise up those other aspects of our region and realize that as a part of a community we can't approach this as a zero-sum game. And it goes back to the internal competition within St. Louis. There's a mentality that permeates, I think, our region as a whole that, there's going to be winners and losers because that's how the structure's been set up for so long, and it's played out that way. So if you fix that structure, I think that can change as well.
Do you buy that?
No, not completely. And in part, we've talked about region, 1.3 million people. That neglects the 350,000 people who live in St. Charles County. Sure. There are more people that live in St. Charles County than live in the city of St. Louis. And it doesn't count the quarter of the almost 3 million people that live in the metropolitan area on the Illinois side of the river. They get. So if you're really talking about the region as a whole, then we ought to be talking about St. Charles County and Franklin County and St. Clair County and those places, because that's what the region is. That's what the Census Bureau defines as a region, and that's what the region is.
Jim, I agree with that, and I think that the way to get to that regionalism is to strengthen what we have in St. Louis first. If St. Louis City and St. Louis County, rather than fighting amongst ourselves, and all of those municipalities, rather than fragmenting ourselves, were the big, strong city that it could be, that helps bring the other regional counties into the fold so that there's a greater political cohesion. Alvin, you were talking about the lack of leadership, and I agree with you, but I think our fragmentation leads to that lack of leadership. We were talking off air while you and Casey were talking earlier, and we were talking about some of the local municipalities that are having infighting right now, what went on in Ellisville, what's going on in University City and Wentzville and Chesterfield and some other places. I think that little tiny municipal infighting is related to our fragmentation, because we divide our spoils and give people little tiny fiefdoms and say, go fight amongst yourselves there, rather than combining our strength as a region and encouraging strong leaders to come up and say, how are we going to lead our region forward, rather than just fight over Peter taking from Paul.
So you were suggesting there for a second, it sounded like the issue of the city and the county and kind of repairing that relationship there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a fan of what some people call the nuclear option. Gene and Cole McNary wrote an op-ed in the Post-Dispatch this week that called for a borough system, but key to that is the city and the county become one, the municipalities go away, and then we divide into 9 different municipalities, boroughs, wards, whatever you call them. We still have some local control, but we unite, and how we divide that area could actually increase African American participation in the political system. While we would lose numbers of officials, we may actually increase strength and encourage stronger black leaders to come up through the system as well.
And so that borough plan said that where do you split the city? Well, at 44 South. So rather than put north and south together, what I would call zebra stripes, we got a line right down to the middle.
Right, and maybe
it's separating, it's separating black from white. Like
but those are the details that come at some point after you decide what your structure is, and those are important details, obviously, that have to be discussed. But that's what makes this discussion so difficult. Is we're talking about a general idea that says what we have now isn't working. And we're talking about probably 500 different options of what we might ultimately get to in terms of a unified unigov or a regionalized government or something better than what we have now.
We're down to about a minute left.
Okay, for 100 years in this community, about every 20 years we've gone through this discussion. Back in the 1920s, in the late 50s, early 60s, in the late 1980s, and now, and each time the discussion of trying to make a radical, huge change has distracted us from zeroing in on core issues. And I think if we want to look at core issues, we need to look at things like education and jobs and so on, rather than the structure of government. Changing a structure of government isn't going to change that.
And mass transit.
I'll give you the last word. We got 15 seconds.
Well, I would just say local control is great if you have the resources to actually provide the services. We have a lot of communities that don't, and that's part of the fragmentation issue as well.
Someone may have to go first to volunteer to relinquish a little power. Thank you all for your time. Alvin, Tony, Jim, and Dave, I appreciate you all being here. Until next time, stay tuned.